right, guys, so we're super excited. I want to welcome you all to the Serve webinar featuring Dr. Mark Kovacs. So I'm excited, and when I first thought about doing this webinar, the first person I wanted to reach out to was Mark. Mark and I have collaborated on several projects. We did a course recently called the Ultimate Tennis Fitness Program. And when it comes to serves, I think that's a huge, important area, and a lot of coaches are interested in it, as well as players. So let me tell you a little bit about what you can expect. I think we'll be together for about an hour. During this hour, we'll start out, and Mark will be talking mostly about the mechanics and the biomechanics behind the serve. He's got a lot of good slides and stuff to show you. And then we'll answer some questions, and then it'll pivot to me, and what I'm going to do in my time is show you some things on the screen which are kind of drill-based ideas and drill strategies that you can actually go on the court and try to do yourself right, on the court. And then we'll answer some more questions, and then at the end, we're going to circle back, and Mark's going to tell you, I've asked him to explain his cool new Cert certification course, which is amazing and in-depth, and it's going to be unbelievable, and he'll tell you about that. So right now, Mark, I'm just going to kick it to you. Let's talk 30,000-foot view. And what are your thoughts on all this?
Awesome. Welcome to everyone. Excited to be here. Thanks, Jorge, for all you're doing. And yeah, exactly. Today's the serve. We're going to touch on some of the big picture items around the serve. If anyone's heard me speak before, like to really focus in on understanding the cause of the issues and then trying to go directly to work on fixes. So we really need to determine the difference between fundamentals and style. But before we can do that, we really need to have a good sense of what the serve looks like. So from that standpoint, we're going to really look here and go through some slides just to give you a sense of where we need to focus our energies as a coach. And the first thing is we have to understand the 8 stages of the serve. The start, the release is your ball toss. Then loading is stage 3, and that's really, really important. That's the one we're going to focus on today. Just due to time, we can't go through all of this, but we're going to focus in on loading. Cocking is actually the last stage that your body stores energy before it starts accelerating. And as you can see there, the lower body's already off the ground, and it's all storing whatever's left in the upper body is being stored, and that's going to release up into the ball. Then we have acceleration, contact. That's where most people spend a lot of their time, is trying to fix contact. However, contact is a result. It's not a cause. So don't spend as much time focused on fixing contact. Contact gives you clues about what's wrong, of course, but it doesn't actually help to try to just fix contact. We have to go earlier in the motion to determine what's wrong and then make the adjustments. Deceleration, that's where we really start having to slow the arm down after we've made contact, and then the finish. So these are the areas, the 8 areas that we use to analyze every serve, whether you're a junior player, collegiate, professional, adult, beginner. Every player goes through these 8 stages. The best in the world do it far better than most, and we want to learn from the best, use that information, as well as the lab-based science that we have behind that. So that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit. So let's get into loading specifically. What I'm showing here is just a faster, more efficient serve versus a slower, less efficient serve. So everyone wants to have a faster, more efficient service motion. What does that mean though? And from a lower body perspective, so stage really 2 and 3 of the serve, we see this, which the faster serves, and you don't have to know exactly what all these lines are. This is actually a muscle EMG. So it's measuring muscle activation in all the major muscles of the lower body. So VL, VM, GA, that's the gastroc, is the GA, that's the calf muscle. But all you have to focus on is the muscles that say back after them are your back leg. Muscles that say front after them are your front leg. So if you notice the slower, less efficient servers, they all have muscle activation all about the same time. So that's doing a squat and doing a jump. That would be the way you think about it. You squat straight down and you jump straight up, you're going to have all the muscles recruiting about the same time. Whereas in a tennis serve, we actually see that the muscles in the back of the leg, the back leg, recruits earlier, and then it shifts into the front leg. So think about stage 3. If we actually go back here and take a look at stage 3, at that point, we're actually pushing into the back leg a little bit more than the front leg. And then as we go up into the next stage, it shifts. And that's exactly what this faster, more efficient serve shows here. So keep that in mind as we continue to talk. So here we have a tennis player who plays at a recreational level. A few things to notice. Notice how the body is rotated already. The back leg is slid around the front leg. There's really no weight going into the back leg, and you can't stay side on. As a result, we see some upper body challenges. We see a lower elbow, and we see an palm open on the racket face. So all these things are related, but they're related to making sure that we take care of the most important cause. One of the most important causes here is the lower body not being in the right position. On the right here, what we see is a force plate data of a player just like this that doesn't utilize their back leg very effectively. So if you have a look at the purple line and you have a look at the red line, the purple line is the front leg, and the red line is the back leg. The back leg doesn't really get engaged at all. It actually falls off a cliff there after the start of the ball bouncing position, whereas the purple line is producing all the force for that motion. So that's what we don't really want. That's an example of someone that has some real big opportunities to help them fix their serve. So what about a really good server? Let's take a top 40 player in the world, Steve Johnson, and we see a player like this is going to have a much, much better pattern. Their back leg is actually going to be the red line here, and that's where they're loading into the back leg, pretty effectively here, as you can see, and then they shift rapidly into the front leg, and that all happens in a split second. So that's what we want to try to get most of our players to do. So again, that's the theory behind what we're working on. What are some things you can do to try to help your players develop that? So for example here, this is a level 3 exercise, pretty basic. It's like a vertical jump with a rotation. And all we're trying to do here is, can the athlete do that? We use this a little bit as a test, because if an athlete can't effectively do this, jump like this in both directions, because we want to see if there's a difference, because we know we only serve in one direction, but normally most tennis players have some imbalances, and we just want to see that. So use that. If they can handle that type of movement with or without resistance, I know some of you may not have resistance, then you can shift in to this more advanced exercise. So what this is this would be done on the back leg predominantly. You'd focus on that, and you'd see, can they do single leg hurdle hops on a back leg? The reason we got the arms above the head makes it a lot harder, because a racket's above the head. We got to get them simulating their center of mass changes when they're serving. So really important to recognize that and try to work through that. So again, these are level 3 and 4 in my terminology. We have 5 levels of exercise. Level 1 is like you've just got an injury and you're doing some very basic prehab type exercises. Anyone can do those. Level 2, most people can do. Even level 3, if you're playing tennis at a somewhat competitive level, you should be able to handle level 3. Level 4 and 5 is tough. Level 4 and 5 exercises, if you're working with older players that have had issues, they're probably not ever getting to level 4 or 5 exercises. If you're working with good juniors, collegiate players, professional players, they should be doing a lot of their training in level 4 and level 5 exercises. So that's just a couple things you can think about. If you have a look here, what we're getting at is the importance of the back leg. And there's a great blog article we've got up right now on the Kovacs Academy site. It's free. It goes through a couple on-court serving drills you can do. This is a single leg serve, pretty challenging exercise. This is a level 4 exercise in what we do. You have to build up to this, but this is the goal. The goal is for your athletes to try to get to that, and that's a single leg serve from a hold position. If the athletes can't do that, they should at least be able to try to do a single leg serve with good rhythm. So notice the left leg here in the top video. Notice how it's not on the ground. They're doing everything off their back leg. So they're just trying to serve completely off their back leg. Again, you've got to have enough leg strength and stability through the hip to be able to do this movement, because if you've got some weaknesses, if you've got some instabilities, this is going to be challenging. So we don't necessarily say this is for everyone, but this is for your competitive players that are looking to load the back leg effectively, really be able to hit, hard serves and be able to push out of the back leg. Again, if you want to learn more about this, the blog on kovacsacademy.com is available right now. You just go to the search box once you get on the site and search in back leg or back leg serving, and it'll pull up the article. So it's a great resource for you. Now let's talk through upper extremity. So if we're looking through the upper extremity, we have three areas. You have your shoulder, you have your elbow. So from a standpoint of the shoulder, elbow, wrist, most of the issues start at the lower body. So you've got to recognize that even though we're talking shoulder and elbow and wrist, if you've got pain, many times it's coming from your hip, especially the opposite side. If you're a right-hander, left hip pain may be a cause, and specifically left ankle issues. And most people don't go all the way down the chain to resolve it. So we have to make sure we target in the areas that we know contribute to inefficient movements. But let's assume we just want to target the shoulder right now. Here's a couple good resources that you can go. Again, if you go to the Academy site, this is another great blog post you can look at. It's called Improving Shoulder Health for the Tennis Athlete. And it's got a bunch of exercises that you can do to help strengthen your decelerators. So these are muscles that help slow the arm down, because most tennis players are relatively strong actually in the muscles they use for forehands on the forehand, so the front of the shoulder, and then muscles they use for the serve. So both of them are strengthening just by playing tennis. The challenge is, as the video shows here, we need to strengthen the decelerators. And this is a great, easy exercise that anyone can do. Just grab a towel, get next to a wall or a fence, stand about 3 feet in front of it, and then just slam the towel into the wall. And again, this is a relatively advanced exercise from a standpoint of velocity. So you may not want to go as fast as this if you've never done it before. Go slow, build up your speed, but you'll see immediately that, hey, I've got to stabilize, I've got to learn how to decelerate, and I've got to strengthen those muscles in my shoulder. So really, really good exercise to do, especially if you're at home. You can do it, a few times a day. And then that article also has 3 or 4 other strengthening exercises that you can do. So hopefully that gives you a couple things that you can work on, both from an on-court standpoint and an off-court perspective. And what we want to talk at here is the last thing is, this is something we're actually launching tomorrow. Last day to sign up is tomorrow. It's a 24-day program where it's designed really for coaches and folks that are really interested in getting into the weeds and the depth around the serve. It's over a dozen modules. We've got a research section there that is summarizing. We've got a research database at our institute of 150 plus published peer-reviewed articles on the serve. And we've turned those into coaches' infographics. So designed to simplify the information and really talk it in coach speak. Then there's on-court and off-court exercises. We go through the science of the serve. We've got some Q&A. We have a lot of time spent on data and the analytics side. So if you're really looking to go deep into the serve, we've got online live sessions as well as Q&As and self-study modules. It's really, really in-depth, really excited about this program because we've done these in person, these 2-day coaches workshops at the Institute for the last 4 or 5 years. And we've tried to turn it into something that we can reach people all over the world. So go on our Facebook page to read more about it. And there's a whole website there that'll allow you to sort of see the curriculum, see how it works, and see if it's something relevant. But at this stage, I think I'll turn it back to Coach Jorge, and we can discuss a little bit more around the serve.
Yeah, so appreciate that, Mark. That's very awesome. I think one of the first times I heard you talk about the 8 stages and all the stuff. So as a coach, who's been teaching for quite some time, by the way, for some of you that had a hard time getting in, we did open the room. It was capped at 100, but now we're up to like 182. One of the questions I have, and I want to get to some of these because they were pre-submitted. So I'll just let you take these. How are the hips and core best used on the serve? Which comes first? The deloading of the shoulder, the drive of the hip? So talk a little bit about the kinetic link. And what do you think the average club player basically doesn't get?
Yeah, no. So a lot of people, I think, have some misconceptions about what's happening with the serve. The biggest part is we have to go back to basic physics. You have to just think about it from a standpoint for every action,
Yeah, I'm just
have an
watching
equal and opposite
tennis
reaction.
webinar
So if we're trying to save our energy or store our energy
on the
going
serve.
up and down,
DC Omar.
that's the opposite action is going up and out. So for every action, we have an equal and opposite reaction. So most people don't actually apply that principle because it's a little uncomfortable or they've never done it. So what they usually do is they go straight down like a squat, and then they have to come up and then twist their hips, and then they're out of sync. When you hear someone say, hey, their serve's just out of rhythm or they're out of sync, that's usually what they're talking about. So going back to what comes first, the ground is what we get our energy from and get our force from. So we have to make sure our lower body is working correctly way before we're concerned about our shoulders or our arm or something like that. So you got to get the hips working first. You got to get the back leg loading first, and then everything else transitions from that position. And then once you get that position right, then you spend a lot more time on the upper body and where the shoulder plane is, where the elbow is, where the wrist is, how contact looks, things like that.
So I heard you present once, I think it was in New York, and you were talking about the top couple of myths that even like tennis coaches do, like stick your left hip out and, get into that position where that left hip is sticking way out past the line. What do you think the top couple in your mind are myths, things that are being done wrong or maybe even coached wrong?
Yeah, so there's a few, and one you mentioned is one of the big ones is stick that front hip out over the baseline. So if you're a right-handed player, it'd be your left hip, and the concept isn't incorrect, it's the cue that's incorrect. So the concept is you do want that bowing motion, that front hip out over the baseline, but you don't just want to shift all your weight into that front hip, because if you shift all your weight into the front hip early, which most people do with that cue, then there's nothing left on the back leg to store and load. So the actual coaching cue needs to be rotate down and back into your right hip, so your back hip, which automatically, if you look at hips, if this is my front hip and this is my back hip, so automatically by going down into the right hip like that, the left hip goes up. That's how the hips work. So if you do that correctly, your front hip is going to go up and slightly out into the court, which is the concept, but you're then still loading the back leg. So that's a huge one. The other big one is bend your knees. As much as people do want you to bend your knees, you don't want to actually bend your knees that deep. Very few players have the strength, stability to get their knee bend as deep as, say, Boris Becker was able to. He was one of the anomalies out there. Most players actually bend too deep and they get stuck at the bottom. So meaning that they can't transition from storing to releasing energy quick enough. If anyone wants to know the number one correlation with serve speed at the professional level, and this holds true at the junior level as well, is the velocity or the speed, how quickly the back hip goes from storing energy to releasing energy. So it's not the depth of the jump, it's how effectively and how powerful you are from getting from wherever your bottom is to exploding up. That goes the same if I'm training an athlete in the NFL and they're trying to do a vertical jump. If you watch the NFL Combine, watch the athletes that jump and do their verticals. They don't try to store energy as low as they can. They don't get a really, really deep knee bend. They get low enough to store a great amount of force, and then they come out of that really quick. And that's the same type of concept we want to think about with the serve.
Yeah, I like that. One question here I think is a good one. For a typical club player, 3.0, 4.0 range, how many serves would you expect them to practice each week?
So it's a great question. It's somewhat individual based on their strength level, based on their endurance, based on how much they've served the weeks prior, because there's a lot of factors that go into it. So in general, you want to say there's a top range. If you're a competitive player that practices 3 times a week or more, you like to play tennis 3 times a week or more, you can probably handle 60 to 100 serves in a session. I wouldn't go anything more than that. But again, that's a pretty big range, 60 to 100. So if you're not doing this consistently, you may be more appropriate to go down at 60. If you're more trained and do this consistently and do a lot of off-court training for your shoulder and your back and your hips, you may be able to take it up to 100. So it's somewhere in that ballpark. So most people, round numbers, if you're playing a set of tennis singles, you're going to serve 40 to 50 serves in a set. So it kind of gives you a round number to think about. So if you know you're playing 2 to 3 sets, that could be as much as 100 to 150 serves if it's a close match and you have a lot of juices and things like that. So you know you have to get some volume in your practice sessions. The question is how much, and that's why the answer isn't as simple as just do 75 serves a day for everyone.
Yeah. Another good question, I'm going to ask it because I think it's a lot of people would have it, is what, in your opinion, what are some of the things that keep people from having a good toss, like, problematic toss, more consistent toss?
Yeah, it's such an important part of the serve, because if you don't get the toss right, everything else has to chase it, and that's the problem. So we know, and we studied this early on when I was at the USTA. We spent a good 6 months studying ball toss locations, release points, heights. We correlated it with serve speeds, with spin rates, male and female, and a bunch of other stuff, because we know if you don't get that right, everything else becomes challenging. So the biggest thing that we saw, and this was very, very consistent among all good servers, is the ball releases somewhere between the eyes and the top of the head. So it's literally a short window. It's only about that much distance that you have to release the ball. So that's really, really important that you understand that. Check where you're releasing your ball. Then where in space, meaning that if 12 o'clock's the net strap and straight in front of you, and that's where you release your arm, where, if you're right-handed, where do you go? Do you go to 12:30? Do you go to 1? Do you go to 1:30? Ideally, most recreational players, more so, they go straight out. Because a lot of the cue is released towards the net. That by itself isn't incorrect. It just makes it harder to load the hips. So most of the pros, nearly all the pros, will release a little bit further to 1 o'clock or 1:30 on the clock face. Reason being is it allows them to coil into their hip, rotate back and down into their hip better. So those two factors, if you can get those two things right, and then the third is try not to have a bent arm. By having a bent arm, it makes the serve toss inconsistent. So if you get the height right, meaning top of the eyes to the top of the head, that stops the ball toss usually getting behind you, and it also stops the face. That's going to allow for good hip rotation, and it's going to allow you to store your energy in the right direction.
25, yes. And then 175.14. So I think
Everyday player, just to help them with their injuries.
Sorry, say that one again, Jorge. You were just muted for a little bit of that question.
Oh yeah. The question is how much, or what's the number one thing a rec player or club player can do to help avoid injury?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I wouldn't say there's only one. There's really on your technique. Get your technique as efficient as possible and making sure you're loading from the right areas. So that's number one. Number two is monitor your volume. So really understand your volume, that you're not overdoing it, because technique and volume are the two factors that contribute the most to injuries. And then the third is make sure you're on a really good off-court training program that's focused on your areas of need. So your areas of need are for everyone that plays tennis. You got to take care of your ankles, got to take care of your hips, got to take care of your core, got to take care of your shoulder. So if you can focus on those areas, the elbow and the wrist are another part, but if you take care of your shoulder, those other parts of the arm usually are doing better. And that's if you don't have any problems. That's assuming that you feel pretty healthy. If you've got issues, then you got to drill down into those issues in more detail and get a really highly personalized program. But again, the biggest things you can do is get better at your techniques and make it more efficient. Secondarily, make sure you're monitoring your volume. And thirdly is get on a really good off-court training program.
like that one. So here's a good question. So basically, when you say amount, it's kind of like pitch count, right? You have to be. I've heard of people say, "Oh, I went to a workshop where it was on serve, and then they served for like 2 or 3 hours, and then all of a sudden, you know, geez, my arm hurts, and it doesn't work that good." So, I know that Mark, you have something. If people wanted to go a little further, besides this 24-day course, you have a ton of stuff online, right? So there's over 250 people on here right now. Where can they go? Because I know you have a lot of free stuff. And
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff we do for free like this, and we do a lot of different things. The kovacsacademy.com site is the best one-stop shop if people are looking for a lot of information for very reasonable. It's very cost-effective. It's $29 a month. There's hundreds of hours of content on there. So that's where we put pretty much all our short kind of courses, tips, drills. We have a question and answer section. There's about 100 answers in there from me directly. So, and there's stuff being added daily on that side. So that's the go-to site if you're looking for a lot of different stuff. And then
maybe while I do my section here, you can put a link in the
yeah,
chat box.
exactly. So, I'll definitely do that in the chat section so people can read it and, we can see that. And then if you go to that site or go to our kovacsinstitute.com site, then you can see our longer form courses that go into way more depth. And that's on specific topics from movement to fitness training to the serve in more detail to, taking care of your shoulders, taking care of your hips. And that really digs deep into one area. So that's kind of how it's structured. And that's really where you can get some good information.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So guys, I'm gonna kind of go into my little section. So I'm gonna share my screen here for a second. And what I wanted to show you, obviously we're talking here, this is what this is about. So when it comes to the serves, if you look at my screen here, I like to think of tennis as 5 things. It's not something I invented, it's just reality. When you're on a tennis court, if you're playing a match, you're going to be doing one of these 5 things, and you'll never do anything other than these 5 things. So at any given moment, you could be serving, you could be returning, you could be playing from the baseline, you could be playing from the net, or you could be playing with a guy at the net, in which case you're hitting passing shots or lobs. And by the way, number 4, the net, I include that transitioning as well, right? So obviously this one's all about serving. So I'm going to show you a couple games. I want you to have some tangible things that you can maybe take away and try to do it here in, on the court. So one of my favorite games is called the serve number game. And you can see on my screen here, I'll try to make this a little bit bigger. So what I do is I basically just take the court and I divide it into 6 little smaller target areas. So the deuce has got 1, 2, 3, and then the ad's got 4, 5, 6. So that's our targeting system. It's not super, crazy advanced, but it's just, I think helpful. So in this game, and actually what I'm going to do is show you a video here, and I'm going to actually show you my wife Marty and I doing this game. So let's just kind of walk through this. If I start the video, so you can see I'm talking to Marty, and those are the targets, right? And this is Marty over there on the other side, and I'm saying, Marty, you're going to try to go. And the way you play this game, let me pause this. This is a game I would challenge you to play. It's called serve number. So you'll serve, and you serve to this first target right here, target area 1. And as soon as you hit it, then you get to go to target area 2. And when you hit that, you go to target area 3. And you're trying to complete this process in as few as serves as possible. So a perfect game would be 6. So let's just kind of spy here. Here comes Marty, right? She's going for area 1 there. And she's going to go there for as long, and she nails it. Okay, so she's good start. Now she goes to area 2, and this is how you would play this game. And she goes to 2, but she missed it. Okay, so she's got 2 serves that she's used up already. 2 serves, and she goes again, just long. Now she's 3 serves. She seems to be stuck on area 2. Okay, nailed it, but now she's used 4 serves, and now she goes to area 3, and you just kind of go back and forth, right? And you can see, I don't have to show you the whole game, but you get the idea. At the end, she'll be way over here finishing on zone 6. So the goal of that game is it's an accuracy game for sure, but it's good because it gives you something to try and something that's measurable. Mark, I found that a lot of times when people practice their serve, they're practicing into, it's very boring for a lot of them because they're practicing into an empty box and they're practicing with no scoring and no targets. So of course that's going to be rough. So that's one little game. I call that the serve number game. Now this second game here, Dice Server, is a clever way to play a game. And this is an unbelievable practice. And if you're a coach, this is homework. It would be the best homework ever. We have students, you know, some of you watching probably, you've been complaining about your serve for maybe years now. You know, my serve isn't good. So here's what we do. The problem is practicing your serve. People think, well, the only way to do it is with a bucket of balls that empty, or maybe I take a private lesson, or I guess when I play, that's when I do it. So let me show you how this works. You see in my hand here, I have a dice, okay? Dice says 1 through 6. I'm gonna roll the dice, okay? Let me watch this, roll the dice. And when I roll it, it comes up with a number. See it rolling. This number happens to be the number 5, okay? So now Marty's gonna start the game. You would play an entire set. Let me pause. So you play one set against yourself, you versus the dice. You roll the dice, and now this is a target area. Marty goes for this target area. If she hits it, boom, she's up 15 love. If she misses this area, she's down love 15. So let's just see how this game goes. So here she goes. She comes up, she nails, oh boy. Second serve, or second toss comes up, and she nails it. All right, so now she's up 15 love. We roll the dice again. This time it comes up as a 3. So now Marty's next point, second point of this set, she has to hit, I must have come up to 2, I read that wrong. Out, so now it's 15 all in this game. And you can see every single time she rolls a dice, she's gonna get a number. Here's the next point, this happens to be 3 again. So now she's gotta go up to T. The score is 15 all in the game. And she hits it, and now she's up 30-15. So you can see where that would be a pretty clever game, right? I mean, it's a great way to practice, and you can do that without even a partner. This would be the ultimate game to do now with coronavirus, where you can't be hitting and exchanging balls. So that's that little game. And now I want to talk about this targeting area. This is super important to me. So earlier on the screen, let me make this a little bit bigger. I was talking about the ground targets. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 4, 5, 6. You remember those? Well, now these back here, I have a different name for these. These are what I call the exit targets, because that's where they exit the court. So notice, by the way, 6 is right behind 6. So it was 6 here, so it's 6 there. This was 5, it's 5 here. We just backed these up. But now we have to add these other things, right? Because it could spin out and go to the pass. It could exit through here. So I just, rather than change all these, I just add 0, then -1. And then this represents where the person would likely be standing. That's where your opponent is going to probably stand. So if I'm serving, that's that. So why is 0 and 2 red? I call those the danger areas, because if you serve, if I'm serving right here and I serve and that exits right through here, that means that this person simply has a simple turn and a rip. I'm not challenging them at all. It's a bad location, okay? But it's an exit target. Same thing here. If they exit through 2, that means they're going to be doing, you know, just a turn and hit. Here's what it looks like on the other side. That's where the person will line up. Those are the exits. And here what they look like all together. All right. So the way you play this game, this is a game I call exit target audit. And I'll show you how it goes. I'm going to just play this little video. Let me shrink this a little bit so it fits right there. So watch this video. And I got Marty going in here. And the way I would recommend you do this is just simply start serving and pay attention. So you see all these targets out here. Watch this serve I just hit. And that exited 1, okay? It landed, let's back that up. Notice where it landed. It landed right here in 2, but it exited through 1. All right? So I can tell you the #1 thing I think club players do wrong is they have too many balls exit through 0. Okay, so let's just watch a couple more. You're not even trying anything right now. You're just serving and observing where the ball goes. So here I serve, it bounced to 6, it exited through 7. All right, so those exit targets are good. And if you're anywhere from 3-5 to 4-0 or higher, I would be focusing on the exit targets and not so much the ground targets. All right, so here comes Marty. We'll let her hit a few. That exited 2. That would technically be a bad exit area because it's right to the person. This one exited -1. That's pretty good. So those are a couple of quick games. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. But those are some quick games. I as a coach who coaches, juniors, adults, one of the bigger problems that I see is that they totally don't hit enough serves. So people say, well, the most under-practiced shot in tennis is a serve. I personally think it's the return to serve, but the serve isn't far behind. And it's probably the most important shot for these reasons. If I have a huge forehand, let's say I'm playing Mark Kovacs, okay? Mark, you're a lefty, I believe. You won
Correct.
the NCAA doubles Division One.
Correct. Lefty.
He won the national championship in doubles Division One back when he was in Auburn, right? So he's
Correct.
play. And if I play Mark, and he's got a big forehand. I mean, his forehand is amazing. Well, if that's his big weapon as a opponent, I can do something about that, right? I can stay away from it. I can maybe isolate the backhand and do my best to not let him use his weapon. If his weapon is his volley, he's an amazing net player. Well, I can counteract. I can get to the net maybe before him. I can maybe hit really good passing shots. I can lob. I can do things to counter. However, if his weapon, his big famous weapon is the serve, there's no counteracting for that. I mean, if you got to serve, I can't outdo it. I can't just say, hey, Mark, you don't get to serve. And conversely, on the other side of that scale is if Mark had a weakness, okay, if Mark's backhand was horrible, well, he would have ways to hide it. He could move around. He could play balls to certain geometrical patterns that would be more likely to avoid. He can do stuff. But if our serve is our weakness, there's no hiding it. You can hide any other weakness with some good footwork and good strategy. But if your serve is your weakness, you can't, how do you strategize around that? So I think that's super important. So I wanted just to share those drills with you. And now, Mark, we've been going about 37 minutes, and I can you see the questions in the chat as well, Mark?
I can. So do you want to pick a couple and I'll try to answer them?
Yeah. So, let's go through this. I'll start at the top. This first one was a question about eye dominance in relationship to the platform stance. It seems like unilateral. Man, this is a high tech. I'm not sure I can read this. You got to be smart.
No, I mean, eye dominance I'll touch on real briefly because, we spent a lot of time on that. So if you're right eye dominant, you're going to want to be slightly adjusted so your right eye is seeing the court a little bit more. So if you see my face, I'm right-handed and I'm right eye dominant. I'm going to want to be looking a little like this to be able to see better out of that right eye. If I'm left eye dominant, I can be more side on for longer and still have a really good visual field. So based on that, most players, not all, but most players subconsciously adjust their positioning to make it more beneficial for them. So that's why you've got to be careful about teaching style versus teaching fundamentals, because that's a style component based on their adjusting their body so they can see a little bit clearer and be in a better position. If you force everyone to start in the same position and serve the exact same way, like a robot, those eye dominance issues are going to be good for some people, but it's going to throw other people off and they're not going to have as good a serve. So yes, you definitely want to take that into account.
I'd like to bring up a phrase that I throw around a lot, which is range of acceptability. I see coaches and I see players a little bit confused, and some coaches are very, very rigid where if you take your racket back a certain way, boom, they want to fix it. Yet when I watch the best players in the world, I see takeaways that are straight up, something a little, something way back. If you look at Rafa and Fed, you look at one of the hardest servers ever, Andy Roddick, it was just a straight up. So I think there is what I refer to as a range of acceptability. And as coaches and players, you got to be careful not to kind of overdo it with that. Here's a good question from Richard. What's the weight ratio between the front and back leg when you're loaded up on the right hip for a righty?
Yeah, great question. So you've got to talk about when in time are we looking at this. And we've looked at this from the beginning of the serve all the way through the end once they land. And people want a round number. And you've got to talk when. Stage 3 of the serve, loading kind of the trophy position when people are loaded into the leg, you want to round, give or take a few percent, about 60% on the back leg, 40% on the front leg. That's right at the load. And that's a specific time that you can actually take a photo of that position. But immediately after that, 2, 3, 4 milliseconds after that, the weight starts to shift into the front leg a little bit more. And by the time they come off the ground and jump into the serve, they've shifted more weight into the front leg at that point. So people have to be a little careful when you're saying, what's the percentage? You got to make sure you're clear on where in the motion we're talking about, because you want more on the back leg during that stage 3 loaded position, but you do quickly shift into the front leg a little bit more as you go up and out into the ball. So be really, really careful on how you use that information.
Yep. Here's a good question about timing the back, the racket drop. There's a lot of things that go wrong with the racket drop. Obviously, no racket drop, weight or tray, too early, too late. What's your best advice regarding the racket drop?
So the big question is you've got to determine why are people having a problem there. It's cause and effect. Is that the cause or is that the result? It's usually the result. Very rarely is the racket drop the cause. The reason people do abnormal racket drops is because they're trying to find range because they've lost range from somewhere else in the motion. So if your hips haven't turned, if you haven't loaded your back leg effectively, you haven't been able to get in the right position, and your body knows it's got to get the racket back there. It has to get the racket back in some position. So what does it do? It automatically just throws the arm back there without any sinking at the wrong time, too early, too late, weight of position, etc. That's assuming you're using the right grip. If you're using the wrong grip, it's very common to see all those type of issues with a forehand grip. But I'm assuming most people, when we're talking about this, are using the right grip. And if they're using the right grip, then it's just the player trying to find range from a position that they're not comfortable in. So don't immediately try to fix the racket drop. If you fix earlier in the motion, nearly always the racket drop takes care of itself because they've got the right range and position. But again, we're talking about somewhat competitive, somewhat athletic players. If you're talking about a club player, a 3-0 player, that's a bit of a different discussion because they have grip issues. They may not use their legs at all. They may just be trying to get the ball on the court. So I'm premising what I just said for competitive players.
Sure. Here's one that you have a pretty famous drill out there. This question is about that. It says, I saw the back leg serve exercise where you, so I don't know if you can still hear me. It looks like my computer completely went.
No, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, that's cool. That was scary. My computer went black for a second. So the question is, for that back serve exercise where you just have them only on their back foot, does that work when for a player that uses the pinpoints or their right foot would normally come up?
Correct. Yeah, it works identically for both. So if you slide your back foot up and you're in a more of a pinpoint stance, you actually have to over focus on the back leg a little bit because it's very easy as you slide the foot up to shift all your weight forward and forget about utilizing your back leg. It's a little bit easier to use your back leg if you keep your foot back because you have to push off both a little bit because they're both on the ground. So that's why you have to actually do that drill more if you are bringing your foot up to make sure that you continue to train it the right way.
Cool. This next question, I think I'll take a shot at answering it. So what types of serves would you want to have in your toolbox, flat, slice, kick, which is when you're going to work on first? So I can tell you what I like to do. So when it comes to serves, I think of every shot. So serves is no different. I look at two big things. Technically, okay, my job is to get my people technically correct. So that would have to do with Mark's stages, those 9 stages and all the stuff. There's a lot to do there, right? And people will spend plenty of time getting their 9 checkpoints corrected. But soon after that, I think of what this question is about, which is more the tactical. So here's my wish list when it comes to tactical. So I want them to be able to get it in, right? So if you're a new player, I want you to be able to start the point and get it going. There's always a debate in the pro community, like, would you have a player serve with the wrong grip just to get it going? So even though that's the wrong grip, and personally, I do that because I think in today's society, people aren't that patient. They're not going to invest in tennis for 8 weeks to see if they can learn it. If they're not able to play pretty quickly, they're off to some other sport. So that's my personal view, and others would tell me I'm malpracticing because I don't teach it the right way. So obviously, I won't let them do that for long. So getting it in is important so they can play. But here's the deal. Initially, I want the player to be able to move the ball from side to side. Okay, that's the first tactic. So I can determine what that person's going to hit. So if I'm playing, say I'm a 3-5 player, and I'm playing another 3-5, well, not every single shot in that person is a 3-5 shot. They don't have a 3-5 forehand, 3-5 backhand, 3-5 volley, 3-5. So it's likely they might have a 3.4 backhand and maybe a 3.8 forehand. And my job as I play is to find the 3.0 shot inside that 3.5 player and then isolate it. So that's going to require accuracy, certain number game up the wazoo, playing left or right. So that's the first thing. As soon as they can change direction, my next goal would be to have them be able to change power levels. So now I can put it to where they want, and I'm a pitcher. I'm putting it there hard or medium or slow, so I can mess with people's timing. So directional control and then speed control. And then way down the path, height control. So I can determine, ideally, this is, now we're getting up to 4 or 5 higher, that instead of having them hit a return right by their torso, I can maybe get it up above their thing. So that involves kicksers. So being able to change the heights on my opponent, instead of always serving and every single time it goes right by their waist, making them have some or experience some uncomfortable positions on their point of contact. So that would be my goal. I think a lot of coaches are similar. So Mark, here's one about wrist pronation. So I'll admit something. As a young coach, you know, I remember being told, snap your wrist, snap your wrist. So to me, that meant that. And then I heard pronation, okay? No, it's really pronation. Then I heard, well, it's supination, then it's pronation. You like to use the word long axis rotation, which I think makes sense. Can you just talk a little bit about that whole area of pronation, the misconceptions of what really happens? You know, what is long axis rotation?
Yeah, no, it's a really great point. And this whole field came about from video. And 30, 40 years ago, you had grainier video. You couldn't slow it down as much. You weren't able to go frame by frame as easily. So people sort of looked at it in real time and made some guesses about what was happening. As we've got better technology, better, video, better research as well, now you really know exactly what's happening. So you're 100% right. It went from wrist snap, which is, I think most people realize now, is a bit incorrect. You don't actually snap your wrist to contact. Your contact is pretty flat and your wrist is very stiff actually at contact. You want it stiff because you got to have impact. But what happens is you get this 3-joint motion. That's why it's called long axis. Your entire is your long axis. You get internal shoulder rotation. You get forearm pronation, which happens at the elbow, and then you get this movement at the wrist right at the end, which is, this thumb down position there right at the end. So you get a little bit of wrist movement at the end. But those are the 3 aspects of long axis rotation. That term I didn't create. That was from a great researcher in Australia, Dr. Bruce Elliott, biomechanics, one of the true tennis researchers out there. He played at a high level and then had a lab at University of Western Australia where he would literally hook people up to cameras and they'd be markers and they'd have all that kind of, high-tech stuff, done back in the 80s and 90s. And he was one of the first to really do that. Jack Roppel was another one. Most people know Jack now from all the other stuff he's done. But Jack was one of the first tennis biomechanists back in the day at University of Illinois. And so those are 2 folks. Paul Rodit's another one. Dwayne Knudsen's another one. They've done real quality lab, biomechanics research in the 80s and 90s, which helped bring us to this point where we better understand what's happening. So the biggest thing is shoulder internal rotation gets the body moving. So we have supination back here during cocking, and then we come up, but the coming up is really happening at the shoulder. So you've got to make sure your shoulder range of motion is appropriate. And people at home can do a simple test here. Just put your arm out like this and figure out how low can we get. Can you turn your thumb over like that? Or do you get stuck with your thumb at about 90 degrees or even less? If you can't turn your thumb all the way over like that, it means you're pretty restricted in your shoulder. And it's going to be really hard to hit the serve the way you need to hit.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good explanation. It's probably one of the more, as a coach, that one of the more misconstrued and frankly mistaught areas. A quick question here: does rocking back and forth during your serve routine add power to the serve, you think?
It's a great question, and that's the style part of serving. It's 100% style. If you like it and it makes you feel good and it gets you jacked up and excited and rhythmical, then go do it. It has no real specific impact on the technique of your serve, but it's not something that is good or bad. It's, is it appropriate for you? That's why when you look at the great servers in history, if you're going to name your top 10 list, John Isner, Ivo Karlovic, Goran Ivanisevic, Boris Becker, Pete Sampras, Serena Williams, Sam Stosur, they all start differently. They all have very, very different starts, and they all have great serves. So the rhythm and the timing and the rocking back and forth concept is a good one, but don't overemphasize that instead of actually working on the true fundamentals. That's the style part of serving.
Yeah, I agree. One, and here's a question that I think is pretty decent. Is pinpoint or platform stance servers height relative in your opinion?
Somewhat, not 100%. We looked at that as well. It's crazy how many of these questions we actually had ourselves. When I say ourselves, it was mainly USTA national coaches would get around and I'd ask them questions. What do we need to know to train juniors better? That was really where it came from. And that was one of the ones is if we know someone's going to be 6'8", you know, and they're 13 years old and they got tall parents and we're projecting them out to be 6'8", 6'9", should we be teaching platform or pinpoint? If you look back over history, all the great servers that are over 6'6" actually bring their feet up. So, you know, Isner, Karlovic, Kevin Anderson, you know, you go through the list. So 6'6" is pretty tall though. So don't,
Right.
you know, most people aren't getting above 6'6", but if you're above 6'6", we feel pretty confident that you should probably bring your foot up. Those guys make adaptations based on their body size and how things are easier for them. Todd Martin, Milos Raonic are the tallest guys to have a platform stance that we've been able to really find. So for whatever that's worth, not saying that it's 100% a rule that you can't break, but in general, most people, the taller they are, the more comfortable they're going to be bringing their foot up. So that's something to think about.
Here's a good question. The question is, the problem is I hit the serve and it hits the tape quite often. How do I fix that? So I think I can try that one. So basically, I don't have a racket, but let's pretend this is my racket, this is my strings, this is the edge, and I'm going this way. So obviously it comes from behind, and generally it goes forward like this. So if this was the flight of the ball, you know, the trajectory where the ball would be, basically what's happening is that ball comes forward. If the more in front I am, you can see the trajectory is going to go down. And the more back I am, it's going to go maybe long. So what happens is, unfortunately, just a couple of millicentimeters here, too far in front, might be in the middle of the net, even though you're only off by a couple inches here. By the time you project that laser beam out, it's going to be low. So the way I would answer this question, if you're hitting the tape a lot, to me, that means that you have to make your point of contact further back, which will send the ball a little bit longer. Now, you can do that one of two ways. You can do it strictly with your arm, or you can position your body back and forth. So it's really two levers. You got your body, and then you got your racket. If your body goes way in front, that's one way. Or if your body stays still and your racket goes straight in front, it could, you know, see how that changes. And there's really a relationship there. I think that's one of the drills I have the most success with is actually having people purposely serve into the service, into no man's land, and then serve into the net, and then serve into no man's land. And I'm actually avoiding the box. So to do that, they're going to hit the service, no man's land, they're going to have to hit back further and to send it farther. And then they hit the net, they're going to have to hit it way in front. So just getting them to understand the relationship that it really only goes where you aim it, right? So if you hit the net, there's no way your racket was like this. It had to be like that. So just kind of taking that data point and reusing it. I had a fairly famous episode when I was a junior where I played a match and I was hitting the tape a lot, like an crazy amount. And I was grumpy and I lost the match. And afterwards I came off and I complained to my coach, I can't believe it. Who hits the tape that much? And my coach said, so how should you fix that? And of course I wasn't buying it. I was like, well, because I stink. Anyway, a lot of people don't take, every time you serve, if there's a result, in, out, long, net, whatever, take that data. Don't just let it go dormant. Take that data and use it. So if I serve in the net, immediately, instead of like, oh, I should be like data, okay, that means I got to hit it further back. And you make all like a computer, just making tons and tons of little, minor adjustments. And I think that's what's helped a lot of the people I've been working with. All right, so we're getting at about 55 minutes in, guys. So I'm going to just take a couple more questions. I know Mark has to be out of here soon. Let me scroll up to make sure I got some of them. What are some good shoulder stretching exercises that improve range of motion, Mark, and strengthen in the shoulder joints?
Yeah, no, it's a really important area, and we've got quite a lot of good resources on this. There's actually a blog post on kovacsacademy.com. It's free there. That probably will give you the whole rundown. There's 4 or 5 exercises there. Couple strengthening ones for the external rotation, so they're your decelerators, and then a few range of motion ones for your internal. So internal is that position, external is that position. Your internal is what gets tight when you play tennis. It gets restricted the more tennis you play. So you need to stretch that area significantly. So if you go to kovacsacademy.com, go to the blog section, there's a article there called Improving Shoulder Health for Tennis. That'll give you a handful of exercises to do. If you're having trouble, just go in the search box and type in shoulder, and there'll be a bunch of stuff on there.
So we're going to wrap this up. I know if we took all the questions, we'd be here till tomorrow. So I'm going to just finish. I want to share my screen one more time. Some of you were typing or actually got a text. So if you look at the screen right here, I have basically 2 websites. One is tennisdrills.tv, which is actually for coaches and it costs money. This one here is jorgecapistani.com. It's my name. And everything on here is 100% free. And you can see all these different lessons on the serve. There's a whole section on the serve. So since this is about serve, you can go here and there's 1, 2, 3, there's 9, there's about 10 different lessons on here. These are all YouTube. They're 100% free. So I would recommend. I did put it, the link to this, jorgecapistani.com, in the comment section there in the chat. And then Mark, why don't you do one more reminder? Tell us about this. You have a lot of data, guys. Mark is a scientist and he speaks all over the world. You can get certified through him. So tell us a little bit as we end here about this serve course that you have.
Yeah, so this is something that's literally taken over 2 years to put together. We've had research fellows that have worked at our institute scouring all the data on the serve throughout the world. So we've got studies from India and studies from Australia and Europe and Asia. And these are lab studies, training studies, different things. And, the goal was put all this together as a resource and then create, an educational certification around it. Most of you know that have followed me, been involved with the International Tennis Performance Association for the last decade, and that's educating and certifying physical trainers, healthcare providers, athletic trainers, coaches that work in the tennis space from a health standpoint. So we used a similar model there to focus just on the serve. So this program's 24 days. It's a online live class, just like a university class. So we're starting tomorrow. So you have to have registered by tomorrow to get admitted to the class. It's 24 days. We have online live sessions. We have self-study aspects. We have Q&As. We have video analysis of your players. You'll be able to submit players and we'll talk through it. You'll go real in depth, and it's really for any coach, anyone that wants to really get into the weeds on the serve, understand the mechanics, understand the science, but also then how do you apply it? We use a simple 3-step process: analyze, diagnose, and then fix. So everything we do will focus on those 3 things. Make sure you know how to analyze effectively. Once you analyze it, what are the diagnostic tools you use to solve your problems? And then once you know all your problems, how do you fix it? So it's focused on that. So if you're looking for more information, go to our Facebook page. Is probably the easiest right now. And then it'll have the link to our program. It's called the Tennis Serve Specialist Certification.
And I think you put the link in the comments earlier. Is that
I
right?
did. The link's in there, and I can put it in again just to make sure everyone has it. But again, if you got any questions, please follow us on Facebook at Kovacs Institute. Follow us on Instagram. We're putting up a bunch of stuff daily. We're going to be doing a lot more free stuff as well for everyone right now. So send in your questions about topics that you may have interest in, and we'll try to do as much as we can to get some good information out there for everyone.
Yeah, and my last comment, because I see it coming up here, some people are asking if this is going to be available afterwards. The quick answer is yes. I will put this for free out there. And Mark, I'll share it with you so you can put it. I will admit, apologies to some of you that were this meeting. I purposely added I went from 100 people allowed to 500. I paid extra to have this. And of course, the meeting started with 100 then. So Kenny, thank you for fixing that. It looked like we got as high as 270 in here for a second. So yes, we will be putting it out, and I will admit that I started to record it about 4 minutes into the thing, so I missed the first 4 minutes, screwed up. So Mark, if you have it recorded, I might use yours. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you checking in. Dr. Mark, thank you so much for spending time, and we'll see you all soon, and take care, everybody. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, everyone.